How you doing? This is BK for manfowars.com, where I'm promoting polite patriotism to help nice ladies and gents offline, teach kids to look, talk, and feel great too, and to help us locally discuss and share great online info we find offline. So check out manfowars.com for more on that and support us if you'd like. You can see some links below. But this video is called COVID-19 Plandemic. Canadians compare Trudeau's response to Trump's to think for yourselves. So you got to compare these responses to think for yourselves, right? Um, and I'm going to go, I'm going to go through a couple of points here to try and make this kind of quick and easy. But the first point is basically how you need to hear different info to think for yourself. If you cannot hear different info, excuse me, sorry about that, stray hair, no allegory. But if you cannot hear different info, then you can't think for yourself, right? It's that simple. If you're somebody out there who's maybe sort of affected, influenced, brainwashed by sort of the radical left, corrupting especially liberals and then corrupting all aspects of society, where you can't talk to people you disagree with, you can't really talk to each other because what if you disagree and then you won't let people talk, then you're screwed. We're all screwed. That type of thinking is meant to screw us up, right? And so, when it comes to that, you just need to do that, right? And this also means comparing the Canadian mainstream media to Canadian independent media to even the more robust U.S. independent media, where there's a longer history of fighting for freedom and prosperity and guaranteed individual rights, and there's 10 times the population and more resources and so on. So there's a lot more going on there to sort of put this current crisis, the COVID-19 pandemic, put that in some context, right? Otherwise, we're just like dogs eating our own shit, right? We're just dogs eating our own shit. Now, why? Because we haven't heard of Purina and Puppy Chow, right? There may be some really good dog food out there. May have some really good nutritious stuff in it. May have some special doggy treats. May have this and that. You can choose Purina. You can choose Puppy Chow. You can choose this. You can choose that. You can compare that, right? But if you're just stuck eating your own shit, then that's all you're going to know, right? And the Canadian media got a $600 million bailout from the Trudeau administration. It's our government. It's the people's government. It's the Canadian people's government. But they use that little brainwashing trick. In America, they call it administration. But in Canada, they call it the Harper government, the Trudeau government, the Chrétien government. But it's not their government. It's our government. They are the secretaries. They are the groundskeepers. They are the help administrating our government, but it's our government. And so that's a little psychological trick that they play on us. So that's point number one. Need to hear different stuff to think for ourselves, right? And that's a variety of information. So sorry about that. The second point is here is, as I said, Trudeau administration, not government. They had a month, at least a month, to think of what to do about this. And yet they keep coming on TV and saying the same things, right? You've got Trudeau, miserable, weak, lying, lispy, bitchy man, right? Did a shitty job in his first term as prime minister. His fans, sort of communist Canadians, right, won't let anybody else say anything else, mostly because they're afraid of how each other will act, right? That's the scariest part about what's going on in Canada and in other sort of communist countries, in the sense of being kind of moving more towards that direction, right? That's the biggest problem, is that people are afraid of each other more than they are, that beats how curious they can be, right? Because if you say Trudeau and then you talk to a Trudeau fan, and Trudeau fans, even though Alberta was mad enough to separate over Trudeau, his shitty job, the first term as prime minister, and if we reelected him, Alberta's like, that's it, we're out of here. You people are crazy. What did people in, say, the province of Ontario do, where I am now? I'm in Toronto. A lot of them couldn't talk to each other, couldn't talk to people who disagree, couldn't hear that stuff, couldn't talk to each other, wouldn't let anyone talk, just kind of, quiet, commie zombie, compliant corporate clones, and get upset at you if you say or do anything different. And so here we are. We're stuck with Trudeau again, right? But they had at least a month to think of what to do about this, and they still come on TV. Trudeau, Chrystia Freeland, the rest of them, Hadju, the rest of them, they come on TV and they say the same bland, boring things. They say, we are encouraging all Canadians to wash your hands, stay away from people, and stay at home. And if you don't stay at home, then we will make you stay at home, right? That's it. So after a month, that's it, right? And various sort of welfare programs, right? Various welfare programs to sort of serve indigenous communities, to this, to that, right? As opposed to a more holistic approach, which actually engages Canadians. It's more like, even if you have to stay home for the next 18 months, the Canadian government will take care of you. But we have here in Communist Canada limited resources. So don't complain because somebody needier than you needs that stuff and we still don't have enough for you. Meanwhile, still sending foreign aid overseas, still wasting tons of money, right? And so on. And I'm going to try and go in order here so I don't just jag all over the place here. Um, and basically, he doesn't work. He officially doesn't work for the Canadian government or the Canadian people, right? The Prime Minister of Canada, Justin Trudeau, officially doesn't work for the Canadian people and doesn't work for Canada. How do I know? Officially, because he signed a bunch of deals, international deals, that put Canada under international control, as opposed to the control of the Canadian people who control their politicians who do what they say. Now, our politicians don't do what we say. They do what they signed off, the people they signed off to say, right? So, for example, he signed the Trans-Pacific Partnership, TPP. What does that mean? We don't control our own trade deals, right? So what about trade? Well, now our trade deals are controlled by international bodies like the World Trade Organization that regulate our trade policy, as opposed to saying, no, 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 we're Canadians, we pick our leaders, and they, put in policies, and they make sure that we can change our minds, we can trade different things, we can use tariffs, we can use whatever. Nope, right? Now we're under the TPP, right? There's other deals like that, but that's an example, right? He put us under the Paris Climate Accords, right? The Paris Climate Accords, right? So, and this was, journalists asked him, journalists also possibly working for globalists, internationalists that want to weaken countries, bring them under sort of international control. They say, Mr. Prime Minister, we know there's a crisis going on in Canada right now, and yet we still have our international commitments to the United Nations when it comes to climate change. In 20 years, the weather might be bad. We're not saying exactly how. We've been wrong before when it comes to global warming, or before that in the 70s, global cooling, totally wrong. We've been wrong about all these disaster predictions, at least the same people saying this stuff. But the weather may be bad. We're not saying how in 20 years. And then we won't have any place to sit if there's no Earth left. So are we going to keep our commitments to climate change? And it's like, listen, I'm locked up in solitary like lots of people are. And so I get my 1 hour a day out of solitary just like all other hardcore prisoners on the Prison Planet or prisonplanet.com where we live right now. And so I check the weather. I check at the weather while I'm online on the internet in the morning. I'm thinking, well, maybe around noonish, more sun, get some sun, vitamin D, keep my cardiovascular up, don't get sick myself, and be a bigger drain on the prisonplanet.com system. So when should I schedule my 1 hour of exercise in the prison yard, right? They can't get the weather right for the afternoon. They can't get the weather right for 2 hours from now, let alone 20 years from now. And yet they say we have to pay these carbon taxes to the United Nations so that we can empower them to stop us from saying, doing, using anything. And then we'll have less money to buy stuff and manufacture stuff for us to buy so that doesn't break the earth as much, right? And that's all garbage, right? And CO2 is only 4% of all this. It's not pollution like Trudeau literally said it was when asked this question. It's stuff that plants breathe, like it's their version of oxygen, and then they put it out into this mixture, oxygen for us. And then so there goes some carbon dioxide, plants take it, and they, put out oxygen, right? It's part of the natural carbon cycle, and it's only 4% of all this atmospheric gas. Humans contribute about half of that. Barely, negligibly affects the weather, right? It's really the proximity to the sun and other factors, tidal waves and so on, but it's not CO2, right? So the carbon tax scam is there. And yet, at this time, where many Canadians are losing their jobs, getting stressed and depressed and possibly starving to death, or at least getting closer to it, Trudeau is going to say, yes, of course, climate change is the most important concern, and Canada will maintain our international commitments to fighting climate change, even at this tough time for Canadians. That is your government's number one priority. What? Your number one priority is hiking the carbon tax by 50% to send money to the UN while we don't have enough resources for people here? Yes. Why? Because again, it doesn't work for Canadians anymore with these deals, right? Um, and um, and when it comes to borders, why is the border at Roxham Road between New York and Quebec still open, right? Even American border guards, an American reporter working for Rebel News, Canadian independent media company, went up there the other day, just a couple of days ago, and was like, okay, I'm going to take a look, and doesn't seem like much going on here, not much security, and so on. American border guards approached him, was like, hey, what are you doing here? We don't like people poking around. He's like, oh, what's going on? He goes, well, we have people murdering people in New York, and then they want to escape, and so they just run up to the border through Canada. We never find them again. And we're like, huh? It's like, yeah, right? So those people, right? And that's the U.S. border guards saying this to this American reporter doing a special report on behalf of Rebel News, Canadian independent media organization run by Ezra Levant, which you probably know of. And so, we don't control our border. Why can't we control our border? Why can't we carefully screen travelers? Why do we have to keep accepting migrants? Why can't we just shut everything down for a bit until this all calms down? If the rest of us have to stay at home, why? Well, because we don't control our own borders anymore. Because Trudeau was among the leaders in getting countries around the world to sign on to the UN Global Compact for Migration. Now, before, the UN, as a human rights issue, said that, you know what, if you're being screwed in your own country, you get to leave, right? If you can't be gay, you can't be this, you can't be that, you're getting persecuted, you should be able to leave. That kind of makes sense. Yeah, probably, you should definitely be able to not be screwed where you live. But the UN Global Compact for Migration, part 2 of that is you should be allowed to go into any country you want. So that's the second part of that. And that means that Canadians don't control our own borders anymore. So even if we demand our politicians do it, if our politicians, and you can rip up all these agreements, right? But if our politicians don't, if our people don't understand that, then we won't. And then you can just go, well, it's ideology. It's just, well, he's a leftist, he's a liberal, he doesn't want to be racist. No, it's not that. That's all a simple explanation for giving our country over to the United Nations, World Health Organization, and other organizations for them to control it, which means that we don't, right? So that's what Trudeau does. And, Trudeau won't even talk about using our own publicly owned Bank of Canada. That's right. We have a publicly owned Bank of Canada in Canada. It's owned by the people. It's owned by the government, right? This is something that COMER, C-O-M-E-R, the Committee on Monetary and Economic Reform, has been fighting to expose and use and share with other Canadians for many years. The late, great Ms. Connie Fogel, leader of the Canadian Action Party, that was the party's key plank, is using the Bank of Canada to print our own money supply that's guaranteed by the resources of the country and the goodwill of Canadian people to work. And the Bank of Canada can legally, right? Other countries don't have this. The U.S. has their private Federal Reserve. Other countries have central banking systems that are not controlled by their government or their people. They're sort of parallel with their government or even above their government, as their government has to ask that bank for money, like often happens in the U.S., right? Where the U.S. Federal Reserve was created in 1913 by central bankers to control the U.S., right? To loan money. But the government is not supposed to control that, although that may have changed recently. I'll get to that more in a sec. But when it comes to the Bank of Canada, they are legally able to, right? Besides just print coins for the mint, you can get these funny commemorative coins, Canadian Olympic coins or whatever, or Terry Fox Heritage Moment coins. They can do more than that, right? The Bank of Canada, not just the Canadian Mint, but the Bank of Canada, can lend money interest-free to federal governments, provincial governments, and municipal or city governments, right? So they can do that, right? Now, what does that mean? That means we don't have to borrow money from overseas, from international banksters who do that to get countries under their control and to use that back and forth exchange to increase their control over countries around the world and the whole world. We don't have to do that, and yet we keep doing that. And we've seen prime ministers at the throne speech or whatever every year saying Canada is paying off our national debt, right? Canada this year, because of sound fiscal planning, we are paying $50 billion towards eliminating our national debt. It's like, to who? Who? Who'd we borrow money from? Right? We don't hear that. We just hear this government's doing a great job. We have a huge debt, and now we're spending $50 billion to pay it off. Right? That's what we hear. But we don't know who those people are, why we had to borrow from them, or how this crap works, even though many patriots have been going on about it for a while now. And in fact, it was his dad, Trudeau Sr., back in the 70s and 80s when he was prime minister, 60s, 70s, 80s. He was around for a while, right? Charming guy, good-looking guy in some ways, pretty ballsy, but also international sellout, pushed for more borrowing money from overseas, not using our own bank, pushed for more diversity, right? Which is meant to culturally weaken people. It's not that people can't be different and think different. It's just the attacks on cultures weaken cultures, as opposed to a more slow, organic evolution of what's already happening there. It's like, you've got some friends, these are your friends. Over time, these friends will change. But instead, suddenly, like, you need these 5, 10 new friends, and all of a sudden you're all paranoid, right? That's the point of this sort of diversity. Plus, it makes you all feel like crap because you're not diverse enough, you're not good enough. You need these people to make you better because you're fundamentally flawed, right? That's a big part of that attack, right? And Trudeau won't even answer MPs or won't answer questions from the media. I heard Trudeau ask this. I heard Foreign Minister Chrystia Freeland ask this. And then just yesterday, May 30th, 2020, I heard Trudeau asked again by Brian Lilly from the Toronto Sun, a more conservative-leaning news organization, the Sun News Network, right? So he swallowed a bit, got his manties in a bunch a bit, but trying to be prime ministerial, thought, well, I'm at my house because we're all quarantining. They're all asking questions on the phone, right? And I'm gonna, so Brian Lilly said, Mr. Prime Minister, MPs, members of Parliament, who make, $150,000 a year, $200,000 a year, if you add salaries, benefits, and perks, ballpark, right? You're due a cost of living increase in April. Right? You're due. This is the third time I've heard, second or third time I've heard Trudeau ask this question. Third time for sure, because I heard Chrystia Freeland ask this. So at least 2 times to Trudeau and 1 time to Freeland, right? So you're due a cost of living increase in April. All the MPs, like a 10, 20%, things go up. Inflation, so you should get more money, right? Hey, makes sense, right? Sort of. But because of this corona crisis, because of this pandemic, because many Canadians are suffering, are you going to give yourself that cost of living increase, or are you going to cancel that cost of living increase because you already make a crap load of money, plus you get benefits, plus you get perks, plus you get insider information that'll help you invest better unless you're caught for insider trading. So I'm sort of adding to the question. But he basically said, are you going to give yourselves the cost of living increase? And what did Trudeau say? Every time, we are committed to bringing a whole of government approach to helping Canadians through this difficult time. That's it. Didn't answer it. He didn't answer it twice. At least I saw. Chrystia Freeland didn't answer it. And then next call, next question, right? In most of the compliant lapdog media, right, even the courageous ones that'll occasionally ask, they won't ask a follow-up question, right? So this is what we're stuck with, unless we can compare it to something else. And now, let me get on to Trump, right? And like I said, a lot of Canadians are afraid of each other because formerly world-famous, nice, polite Canadians now getting sheepish, sideways, gender equal, neutral, bitchy, sketchy, like pretend grumpy wives or girlfriends, right? Touching hair, face, making it hard to talk. You use English, they use sketchy. Then you can't use English anymore, you use sketchy. Then people don't get along with each other and they go do it near strangers, right? Sort of being turned into commie zombies or compliant corporate clones. I've got the last few years on video at manforwars.com. On my YouTube BitChute channels, for example, you can see. So that's a real problem because, if even if people are cool with each other, right? They're afraid of what somebody else will do if they say or do anything different, right? So, for example, with climate change, I'm talking with a friend of mine, neighbor, recently about it, and he sort of was subscribing to it, talking about, I was like, well, pollution's bad, but the climate change thing, not so sure, right? And I could see him the same way a lot of people go. They kind of roll their eyes and go, okay, we're cool, we respect each other, you're not stupid, I'm not stupid, but what if I think or say this? What'll someone do to me? They'll treat me like how I'm supposed to treat people, right? As part of the communist Canadian brainwashing and the globalist communism, kind of making everyone around the world kind of scared to talk to each other or hear or think or say or do anything different because of how they'll react with each other, right? It's not so much that, oh, that's pretty cool. It's stupid, I laugh. Smart, I enjoy. Maybe even pass it on. No, because of how people will react, especially when we're not nice, polite, straight up, ladies and gents offline who can be cool with each other when we get uncomfortable and make people uncomfortable if somebody does anything different, right? So that makes it tough to talk about climate change and a bunch of other stuff. And it makes it tough to talk about Trump, right? Because Trump is supposed to get your manties in a bunch or your panties in a bunch, you know? Hey, you know what Trump did? Oh, Trump, yeah, no, he's such a jerk. Ah, sucks. They're not even serious. They're not like, you like Trump? Calm down. Let me be as an informed and empowered adult. Let me be someone who sets you straight and explains to you exactly why you should hate that guy. They don't do that, right? They just act uncomfortable. And part of it is because, maybe they're uncomfortable. It's part of the brainwashing. Part of it is because they know if they learn something and they try and tell someone, that person will make them uncomfortable. So just skip it, right? So that's a huge problem that we have to address, certainly in Canada and people worldwide, where this is an issue, especially in more liberal areas where there's more gender equal confusion as opposed to more conservative areas where it's like, no, gender responsible. We know how to act. We know how to not lie and look each other in the eye. We know how to be cool, straight up guys and hang out with straight up or graceful feminine girls and empower each other. And don't make it hard to do anything else except make each other uncomfortable, right? So, so that's something we got to deal with, right? But okay, so now on Trump. Now, if you might think, excuse me, you might think, well, Trump is running a cult, right? You're part of a cult member. You're one of those cultist zombies. You're a racist, or you're a self-hating colored person who's a racist. It's like, no, nothing like that, right? The people on the more conservative side of things, they argue with each other all the time. They talk to each other. They argue with each other. They don't all think, hear, say, do the same things, make everyone else be uncomfortable if anyone does anything else, and then try and make them a zombie too. We don't do that, right? And so when it comes to Trump, I think he's doing great at a lot of stuff, right? And I think he's doing not great at some stuff. And I'm happy to talk about it with anybody, including him, face to face, man to man, eye to eye. What's up, right? It's not an issue, right? For example, I think he's doing great. He may have nationalized the Federal Reserve, as I alluded to earlier in this video, where Bloomberg News on March 27, 2020 just reported that Trump, as part of the reaction to this COVID-19 pandemic or Plandemic, he's sort of merging the Federal Reserve, which is outside the U.S. government control, with the U.S. Treasury, which is inside the U.S. government control. And so effectively, as the Bloomberg article says, meet the new chairman of the Federal Reserve, Donald J. Trump, right? Now, other factors involved could be temporary, just for certain spending bills, just for this emergency crisis time period. But the fact that he, as the President of the United States, could finally possibly take over control of the U.S. money supply when Abe Lincoln got killed for doing it, Andrew Jackson got killed for trying to do it, John F. Kennedy with Executive Order 11110 was going to try and get rid of the Federal Reserve, introduce a silver-backed currency, right? He got killed for the bankers have killed all the presidents for trying to do it, right? Lincoln, Jackson, Kennedy, right? And then but all of a sudden, boom, Trump just did it. What? Right? So that's amazing, right? So certainly some good things he's doing. I also don't like Trump's response to Thomas Massie, a Republican congressman from Kentucky, who says, no, we can't just vote on these massive bills, $2 trillion, $4 trillion, worth of spending to help Americans in this crisis without being present for the vote, right? We have to be present. We have to put our name on what we're doing. There's some good stuff in there, and there's a lot of bad stuff in there that's getting pushed through as part of this. Diversity officers at companies, extra money for abortion stuff, all this other shit that has nothing to do with this crisis, right? If you're going to vote for this, then you got to show up to work. And Trump is like, he should be kicked out of the Republican Party. He's doing so bad. I can't believe he's holding up this vote. We can't destroy the economy. The American people need, this bill. We should be able to have a unanimous consent vote where every congressman stays at home. They don't come to Congress because they might make each other sick. A lot of them are older. And so we need to have a unanimous vote and just unanimous consent. Nobody puts their name on on the bill, right? And Thomas Massey's like, screw that, right? First responders, hospital workers got to work, grocery store workers got to work, truckers got to work, Congress has to work. Go in there, look at this bill, read this bill, or get your people to read the bill and tell you what the hell's in it, and then you put your name on it. We're not just going to have a bunch of bullshit in these giant spending bills that go to a bunch of horrible programs that don't actually help people and that create massive inflation and weaken the dollar to the point where even if everyone's a millionaire, a loaf of bread's a $500,000. So what's the point, right? So so I don't like Trump for attacking Thomas Massey that way, and he's going at him hard, right? But he wants to save the economy, partly for save the economy, save America, partly for his reelection. A lot of it's based on having a good economy. I get it, but I don't like that. And there's lots more good and bad about Trump I can go through. So just so you know, I'm not a cultist, and other people who like him aren't cultists. There probably are some, right? There's some people that aren't kind of deeper level thinkers, nuanced thinkers that don't understand the bigger nationalism versus globalism, countries trying to survive, be strong and free and independent, protect their sovereignty, versus globalists, international bankers controlling international institutions, trying to use them to strangle the world and control them, bring them more into sort of a communist China sort of system worldwide, which is why they're being elevated to replace the US as the global role model. The West is supposed to go down, China's supposed to go up. We're supposed to copy how good things are in China, and then once we all do that, and we're all under a giant communist Chinese, nothing against the people, but the government, communist Chinese control grid, then China can hand the world to the UN, right? And the UN built China up since the 1970s to do this, when the UN and George Bush Sr. and other top officials from America and England went to China in the 70s and went, oh my God, communism since the 50s and 60s has destroyed you. People are starving. You know what? We'll help you out. You need one-child policies. You need all this. And so that the UN built China to do this, right? Since for the last 50 years. So that's what we're up against. Anyway, so back to this corona crisis, right? On COVID-19, right? First of all, Trump is a man, like a straight up kind of man, right? Grandfatherly figure, right? Now he can be straight talking and he can certainly be scrappy with foes, but otherwise he's a man. You can sense how comfortable people are with him and how comfortable he is with them. As long as no one trying to make each other uncomfortable, he's comfortable with people. He's comfortable with people who come visit the White House. It's on video. It's at the White House YouTube channel. You can see all the different stakeholders. You know what I mean? He's a cool guy. Other people are cool with him. Men feel like men. Women feel like women. Kids feel special. They run around the Oval Office playing with toy airplanes and stuff. Like he's a man, right? So he's not a fearful, hopeless mess like Trudeau is. He's more of a hopeful, sensible man, right? And so he's having a measured approach, right? Balancing some of the health concerns, taking them very, very seriously, right? And also balancing the economic concerns, right? Saying, okay, look, we can't save 100,000 from the flu and kill 10 million from a depression, at least in my shorthand. So we have to be reasonable about this, right? And he's saying, he doesn't say, while Trudeau is saying stuff like, Canadians must stay home. And if you don't stay home, then we will force you to stay home, right? Don't make us do that. Trump goes, we weren't meant to stay home. We were supposed to be working. America's not built for this. We're not supposed to sit in our houses and be scared of the flu, right? So yes, it's serious. Yes, it's harming people. Yes, but this is not who we are, right? We are going to get past this fast, soon, right? And it's, don't go too fast, people will die. Yeah, don't go too slow, people will die. Another way, or in many other ways, from the many health risks associated with stress, depression, and starvation when it comes to economic concerns, right? So Trump is much more measured at that, right? And he's mobilizing the government and the private sector response. This is something that you don't see Trudeau doing as much, right? With Trudeau, it's more government handouts, government bailouts, government welfare, right? That's all, right? Whereas Trump, you can clearly see him mobilizing the entire U.S. private sector to deal with this crisis, right? Giving those people jobs, giving those people money, right? Helping them, engaging them, right? He's saying, you guys make alcohol, right? So why don't you switch to making hand sanitizer? It's not the same thing, but you have similar equipment, and you can make alcohol-based hand sanitizer. Boom, that's what happens, right? You've got the Army building 2,300 hospital beds, right? In Canada, the Army's on standby, generic this, generic that. Well, generic military, engineering, safety. There's no specifics. There's no this. There's no, with Trump, it's like, with the great company 3M has just announced that they would be making and donating 2 million masks, right? It's great. You know, we've got, and the great distiller, Coors, they decided they're switching from making alcohol to making hand sanitizer. All this amazing private sector activity, right? And if you can compare Trudeau's response, right, his daily 11 a.m. press conferences, to Trump's, which were, I think they were earlier in the day, around noon, 1-ish or whatever, and now I think they're moved back to 5 p.m. If you compare the two, then you can think for yourself and you can help other people think for themselves. If not, like I said, you're a dog eating their own shit as opposed to a dog learning, wait a minute, I have to do this? There's Purina, there's puppy chow, there's special doggy treats, arr, arr, arr. Right? So that's really important. Um, and you know, he also he spars with the hostile media. Trump spars with a hostile media, right? And I like a hostile media. I like an honest media above all, but I like a hostile media. I like a media that'll ask questions. Even me, as a fan of a lot of what he's doing, right? I'd still poke him. I wouldn't just be like, I like what you're doing. Can you do it more? Or I wouldn't be like, you need to crack down on people more. I'd be asking him about stuff that he's not doing, right? I would be a hostile reporter, even with somebody I liked, on behalf of people to get them answers or get them more help in a different way. So I like the fact that there's a hostile media. I don't like the fact that they're a lying media, that they're fake news. They're fake news. My God, they're fake news. The enemy of the people. Fake news. You know, as Trump says, right? All that's great. And for a U.S. leader to say that, don't trust the media. That's like, what? Holy crap. That's incredible, right? And then he goes back and forth, and the media is hostile to him and attacking him. He responds. He's not a dictator. He's not censoring them. He's not saying, don't ask that. He's not saying, we're bailing you out, and if you don't do what I want, we'll stop, right? No, he's going back and forth. He'll argue with him. Some people will say, see, he's so bad. No, that bitch started it. That professional lying bitch in the media who makes more bitches, who make more bitches, who make more bitches out of the rest of us, or at least the people that follow them, they started it, right? So he'll argue with them, right? And as part of that, arguing with the hostile media, Trump's approval ratings are skyrocketing. They're skyrocketing so much that the media, U.S. media, is talking about not putting his press conferences on TV, censoring the U.S. president, right? Not asking him questions, right? CNN says, well, if he makes a special request, maybe we'll air it, but otherwise we have no obligation to air what he's saying. It's like, this is the daily, everyone's staying at home under quarantine. Half the world, like 3 billion people now, right, are locked up under quarantine, and you can't have him on TV? No. Why? Because he's winning. That's why, right? And so you don't have an ass-kissing media like you do in Canada, a bailed-out ass-kissing media. Don't be weird, don't be different, compliant corporate clones, right? Like we have with Trudeau, where occasionally a couple of questions that are a bit more pokey about the carbon tax, about the MP's raise will get in there, but they'll quickly be brushed off or dismissed, right? Or there won't be follow-ups. There won't be this. But with Trump, he'll go back and forth, right? He'll go back and forth a couple of times. And then when the reporter is just pushing, he's just, all right, enough. Next question, right? You asked, I answered. You asked a follow-up, I answered. You're still yelling. Yell a bit back, and then enough. Enough. Next question, right? That's a little bit more normal and a little bit more reasonable, right? So that's what's going on, and that's why I say COVID-19 Plandemic. Canadians, compare Trudeau to Trump's response to think for yourselves, right? And if what I'm saying stupid, laugh at it. If what I'm saying smart, use it, enjoy it, pass it on, right? A lot of people are now more open-minded. Now that we're all facing an existential threat, our way of life may never be the same, or our life may actually end as a result of these conditions, from stress, depression, whatever, stress weakening our immune systems, virus might kill us, martial law might kill us, depression, whatever might kill us, crazy people on the street, if men don't make sure everyone's cool, polite Canadians and people do the same worldwide, might kill us as a starving homeless person sees you coming from the grocery store, hits you in the head with a brick and takes your shit, right? Like lots of things, right? So people are more interested right now in going, okay, you know what? You're a little too much at most times, but now you're coming in pretty handy, right? And again, a lot of times Canadians, they're not stupid, they're just quiet. But if you're quiet for too long, you get stupid, right? If you're stupid, not stupid, quiet, but can still talk, mix it up here and there. But if you don't, then eventually you don't talk, you don't think, you don't whatever, you don't challenge your ideas, you don't discuss different things, you don't express yourselves as unique individuals, evolving how you feel about each other and evolving your own opinions as part of that dialectic, then you do get stupid, right? So it's that simple, right? Anyway, so we'll leave it there for now. Again, BK for manforwars.com. Feel free to like, comment, share, subscribe, get in touch with questions, to work together, or financial support. Otherwise, I do hope this helps, and I'll talk to you soon. Cheers.